Welcome to the RecoverMate Podcast, where love, sobriety, and life gets real. I'm Rick.
And I'm Danielle. We're a husband and wife team sharing our personal journey through sobriety. And together, we are having all the difficult conversations that most people are too afraid to have in their relationship.
We're diving deep into the hard stuff, from our own past to recovery, parenting challenges, finances, and everything in between that comes with building a life together.
And trust us, nothing is off limits here. We're keeping it raw, honest, and unfiltered because that's what recovery, love, and real life looks like.
So whether you're sober, curious about recovery, or just looking for ways to keep love alive while living a sober life, you've come to the right place.
We're excited to share our most forbidden conversations with you. So grab a seat, buckle up, and get ready for the kind of discussions that you won't hear anywhere else.
Let's go! Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of the RecoverMate Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about our experiences with alcohol in the workplace.
Yes, it's a big one. I think a lot of people wonder, okay, are we encouraging the drinking culture in our workplace or in our office or in our workshop? So, we've got a few experiences of our own. So
I know, especially for me, being from a tradesman background, it was very heavy on alcohol when it comes to like Friday afternoon beers or beers after work, or even we're buying boxes of beers to bring to work as a punishment. So, and that just doesn't matter where I went. I was, when I was working in the mines, not so much working on the mine site, but going back to the workshop after being on site for a certain amount of time, you'd be going back having some beers or buying beers on the way back, or you'd have beers in the fridge ready to go. So it was a real thing.
Yep. So take us right back. Like, how soon did this start off, and what does it look like, and what things are going on in the workplace in terms of alcohol?
Yeah, even for me, I started my apprenticeship when I was 16, and obviously the other tradesmen are there are a lot older than me at the time, but there was every Friday night they were having beers. So it wasn't until I got to 18 where I was actually allowed to, buy into this. Everything was like $5 or $10 a week out of your pay would go towards being able to come back on a Friday night and have some beers.
Was that optional, or was that just, I suppose being young and impressionable, 16, 17, you were just doing that because that's what the culture was, that's what everyone else was doing?
I guess in that, they were very good about not allowing me to have any beers until I turned 18. So in that workplace, it was a little bit different. They weren't actually allowing me to come back on a Friday night and have the beers, or even drink with the guys at Christmas time as well. It wasn't until I turned a certain age where they actually allowed me to come back and drink with them. So it wasn't a forced thing, but it was obviously heavily encouraged to create that camaraderie with the work crew.
What would you say, looking back now, on this whole culture? So we're talking about you're a tradesman now, but apprentice at the time. What was it like being young and new to the workforce, and particularly that blue collar type work?
Well, it's always that work hard, play hard mentality that, especially in the town we grew up in, it was exactly the same way. But the guys would work 11, 12 hours for the day, and then all they talk about is, I can't wait to finish work and go for a beer, or let's go to the pub after work, or Friday night, let's catch up and have some beers tonight and pretty much talk shit and connect in that way. So for me, it created a lot of connection in terms of, that's how I seen connection growing up, was through alcohol. So as soon as I got a chance to catch up with the work guys, either at work or after work, somewhere else outside the workshop, for me, it was great, I get to create connection with these guys, get to build this camaraderie, get to really gel with them.
And would you say there was a problem with that? Were there any problems at the time that arose where this was okay, this could be a problem, or was it at the time all good? It was just a good way of having connection, like you said. I'm more trying to understand where it suddenly became something different.
Yeah, I guess in the moment it felt that it was just the normal, everyone does it. This is just a way that everyone connects. Looking back at it now, There's a numerous amount of times where you'd have a few beers, and I was on my P plates at the time. It's obviously going to be 0%. So drinking anything at all at those times was obviously a hazard to me losing my license, or a hazard to me drink driving in general.
And you needed your license to have the job, right? It was a part of the job description was to actually have a license, be able to drive to and from sites or workshops or whatever you were working on at the time. So in that, it's sort of like you're new, you're young, you're just getting the understanding of the workplace and this new culture. You're doing beers every Friday. Like you said, you're on your P plate, so you're not supposed to be drinking. So there's like that catch-22 where sure, it's all free choice and free will, but you're also young. So I'm assuming you weren't the only one that was maybe drinking a few too many beers in the workshop and then driving home that evening. So was there, would you say, modeling of some sort at that age that would make you feel like that behavior was accepted or that behavior was okay?
I'd say 90% of the guys were drinking too much. Like you might have the odd one or two that might have just a couple and know the limit and have to go home.
Mm-hmm.
But majority of them were alcoholics themselves.
Okay.
So they'd have 5 or 6 or more. And they'd be there later than you are. And you've already had a few too many yourself. So that was the modelling that you're following along with. Like these are the guys, as the tradesman, you're the apprentice. You're copying what they're doing. You're learning from them. You're picking up all their attributes and their bad habits and their good habits and rolling all into one to try and turn yourself into this tradesman as well.
Right.
And get through this apprenticeship. So not only are you picking it up during work time, but if you're hanging out with them after work or having beers with them after work, you're picking up those same habits.
And I suppose being young and impressionable, tradesmen sometimes tend a lot to their apprentices, or sometimes they find them a bit annoying because they're young and they haven't learned certain things. And I suppose it's really important for the young kids coming in as apprentices that there's a part of them that wants to actually please the tradesman as well. So this sort of behavior, I suppose, would get you in their good books, right? Like chilling out with them, hanging out, getting to know them more personally helps build that relationship. So if at any point there was any problems that arose, then you had those points. Yeah.
Yeah, like you built that connection, right? So like if you just see them Monday to Friday, 6 or 8 hours a day, and you're sort of working alongside them, like I say, everyone's a little bit different, or everyone's a bit on edge when it comes to being at work and trying to get things right. And especially like us as a Boilermaker in that trade, you've got to make sure everything's pinpoint. It's got to be to the drawing, and everything's got to be right. Especially if you're running behind on jobs, or if jobs need to get out quick, things can get pretty hectic at times. So when it gets to the point where you're going for a beer afterwards, everyone calms down, everyone cools off, everyone has a good joke, everyone has a laugh, and you build that little connection with them at that time. Right. So the following day, or the following week, if you're hanging out again at work and things get hectic, you can bring up a joke that you might have talked about after work, and they have a bit of a laugh, and everyone lights up a little bit at work, or you build that camaraderie with them where they want to have you as their apprentice, and they want to take you on under their wing and look after you a bit more because of outside of work activities.
Right. Okay. So acceptance is really important for apprentices. So coming back, you said that at some point there was punishments and then you had to pay with a carton or something. What is that about?
Yeah, so I've been in a few different workplaces where if you make a mistake at work, and not so much just something small, but I mean, you make a big mistake, like you've, again, being back as a Boilermaker, talking about cutting the wrong material or cutting it too short, or it's pretty much about costing the company money, or if you've blown a shift for whatever reason. Like, it could be just a whole bunch of different stuff that's happened that looks poorly on you. How they would punish you in terms was you had to go buy a carton, and there'd be a carton board on they even have a whiteboard in the office somewhere of cartons you weigh for certain things.
Wow.
So each week or each payday or however it worked, you had to bring in X amount of cartons or whatever the punishment was. You had to bring it in for that weekend so the guys can have beers on a Friday night.
So what if you don't drink? So what if you're an apprentice, 17, 16, maybe doesn't drink or maybe doesn't want to drink? Would you still have to pay in beers? Is that just what the culture is?
That's just what the culture is. So there was no really escaping it. It's really up to you whether you drank the beers with the guys or whether you bought them for the guys and you went home. So your punishment was evidently monetary value, but the monetary value was buying the beers for the other guys.
And what would you say is a negative result as having that as a punishment?
Well, the biggest negative is that, just talking about like a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, if you're almost getting forced into it, forced into the sake of having to buy beers for the guys and drink for the guys. If you're not a heavy drinker or even like as an apprentice, you don't earn a lot of money. $50 for a carton, depending on what you drink, can be a lot of money for someone who doesn't earn a lot of money each week. I know for me, like I earned, it was like $1,000 a fortnight, which sounds like a lot of money for an apprentice, but we're also working 110-hour fortnights. So we're working Monday to Saturday, a stupid amount of hours to get that money. And then when you take out car payments and regos and everything else you got to do and rent if you're living somewhere, that money went pretty quick. So if you're out buying $50 cartons weekly, especially as an apprentice, the amount of mistakes you make, that can build up pretty quick.
And I suppose like anything, when there's punishment, and particularly monetary punishment, like it makes the apprentice anxious a lot of the time.
It brings fear, yeah. You're definitely scared to make mistakes, and you're scared to ask questions, and it really gets a lot of fear involved, that you're also worried about everything else, so you're not actually focusing on what you're doing. So there's a bigger chance of actually making mistakes in that way, because you're not allowed to just calm down, really, take note of what's going on and learn from around you. Like at the time, you're really just scared of making a mistake to have to pay cartons or money towards everyone else.
Yeah. And you said this happened in multiple places you worked. So it wasn't just a once-off, like it was a real culture.
Yeah, so this is even like when I was an apprentice, and then as I finished my apprenticeship and left to work at other companies, they also had the same avenue. So there was cartons to be paid, there was drinks on Friday nights, sometimes there's drinks after work every night. Like it just depended on where I was and what everyone was doing, but Friday night drinks was the main staple on every place. So they may or may not had to have cartons as a punishment, but Friday night beers was pretty much heavy everywhere.
And so I suppose you said that this is just a cultural norm now. So at some point, everyone's just accepted that this is what it is. This is what I can expect if I go and work in a place like this, that it's just normalized. Or were there people that felt like this wasn't good, or was there pushback? Like, what do you remember?
I wouldn't say there's pushback, but I'd say there was guys that definitely weren't involved in it, and they were pretty much going home as soon as the bell rung. It's time to go home. They're out of there. There wasn't. I wouldn't say every single person was involved, but it was mainly like the main tradesmen, the main people at the company, the bosses, the managers, the supervisors. A lot of them were pretty heavy in it. But you look at them there at the time when I was there, early 20s, they were late 30s, 40s, 50s. So they're at that part where they're well out of their trade. They've been in the company a long time. They've probably got things going on at home that they don't want to go home for. And then with that, they're also then bringing all the younger guys down to be a part of this culture and try and fit in. So it's a hard one to sort of get around, especially as a young apprentice or a young tradesman, because you're like I say, trying to fit in as well. And if you don't go and be a part of that on a Friday night or an after work thing, you miss out on that connection that all these guys have. And you feel because it's the alcohol that's causing this connection, evidently those guys work together for 10, 15 years.
Sure.
And you might have just walked into the workplace. But to you, or to me, even at the time, you feel like to create that connection, you need to hang back and have a beer. And then one beer turned to 2 beers, 2 beers turned to 5 beers, and you just got stuck in that space.
So what would you say if our son just so happened that he wanted to step into a trade as well and follow his dad's footsteps? Like, what would you say to him about the culture?
I mean, I'd create awareness about it. I mean, we've had, I was there, he's 8 now. So you're looking at 8 to 10 years, potentially, if that's what the track he wants to go down. I mean, we've created a lot of awareness now in him and with ourselves. Alcohol is not the end all and be all. It was something that we've seen with our families in our lives growing up. Alcohol was such a heavy thing, where I'm hoping now that because we've gotten rid of it and we've nothing to do with that side of things, that for the next 10 years of him growing up into this young man, that he can see that that's not what you need to build connections.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I've stated on previous podcasts before, is that my way to build connection was through alcohol. It's how I built it with my father, it's how to build it with my friends, it's how I built it with, peers all around, and obviously in the workplace. So I'm pushing for him that he doesn't need to have alcohol to create that connection.
So what are the different ways? So if someone's listening right now and they've maybe got a son or maybe even themselves are in this situation, what are some other ways that they could build connection? And you would know from being in your current position, you're dealing with people all the time, right? And your crew, all of them are actually older than you, and they already are indoctrinated into this culture. So how would you navigate it, first of all, being a leader in your role, but then also if you were a parent or somebody who is an apprentice at the moment, like what skills can they develop so they don't get washed into this culture?
Yeah, it's a good question because, there's a few different ways you can go about it. With me, still a lot of my guys that I work with or that work under me still drink, but I've made it very evident I don't. So my whole team knows I don't drink. So that's one starting point. For a young apprentice, you may have to say that a few times before the older tradesman gets that through their domes. So just be certain that if you don't want to drink, then just tell them that. And just stand by that's what you want. Tell them that, be certain in it, and you have to say it a few times just to make sure that they understand that. You don't have to be forced into it. There's no, you do this or else, because then you can start getting into heavier topics when it comes to HR.
And I also will note that you use humor a lot. So you don't take it so seriously or so personally. I've witnessed where someone has actually questioned you on your sobriety, and you find a way to just make it so light and humorous and going like, it's all good. If that's what you want to do, by all means. But hey, like I'm really good doing what I'm doing. I'm good with my 0% beers. I know you can argue that they're not real beers, but for me, this is what works for me. And I've seen you beautifully go, well, you know what, I'm actually really focusing on my health right now. But I'm definitely interested in still having a chat with you and just asking them questions like you would if you were drinking or not, right?
And that's the biggest thing. Don't shy away from the conversation. Don't think because you can't drink with them that you can't talk with them or you can't hang out with them. I wouldn't recommend going to the pub with them. But that by all means, if there's an event on the pub, don't miss it because you're not drinking. You can go and have a Coke or a water or a 0% beer if you're interested in having that. But like I still try to get to events as much as possible these days. I've obviously gone from being a heavy drinker and alcoholic to now nothing. So it was a bit harder for me in that first stage of having nothing to go to these events because I didn't want to tempt myself into something else or tempt myself back into that. But if you haven't drank before or if you drink at a younger age, it's a lot easier to go to these events because you can't allow yourself to be tempted like I did. So, don't miss events. I wouldn't suggest going to the pub. I would suggest hanging around for a long time after work when the guys are all drinking. Hang around, have a Coke with them or they have one beer. But once they start drinking more and more, it'll get more and more messy and more pushed on you to drink.
And there are other topics as well that you guys can use to connect. So sports is a big thing for guys. So if you are focusing on your health, there's chances are there is at least one sport that you watch or video games, bars.
Yeah, just any topic that you enjoy. There'll be someone there that enjoys it too. And for me, mine's definitely sport. I played sport all my life, still play sport now. I still enjoy watching sport. So it's really good to create a bit of camaraderie with the guys and see what teams they go for. And then when your team versus their team on the weekend, it's good to create a little bit of banter and that beforehand, and that really sparks up that connection as well.
Yeah, for sure. And being in your role now, so if you were to have someone young as an apprentice, and let's just say that they've done something wrong, what would you think is a more suitable punishment? So instead of, okay, let's buy beers for the workshop, how would you feel being the man you are now and knowing how that apprentice might be feeling and about building a different culture?
Yeah, we discussed this earlier, and for me, I don't like punishments in general. Punishments, I think, get you nowhere. I think punishments themselves are really for the company and doesn't help the person. So it's really about having that conversation and just getting to know, one, why the mistake was made, and then two, how they were feeling in the moment of that, and three, how do we stop this happening again? So it's not about tearing them up and like they say, tear them a new asshole because they've made a mistake. We all make mistakes. I've made plenty throughout my career, and I'm sure I still make more now. But it's just creating that understanding. And it's for them as well, because you don't learn by getting yelled at. You learn by going through the steps of what you did, why the mistake was made, learning from that mistake, and then making sure it doesn't happen again.
And I suppose an argument that I hear quite frequently, and so would you, is, well, I've told them time and time again and they keep making the same mistake. And what I always respond back with, okay, maybe you need to change the approach in how you're saying it to them. Or you need to look at what skills you need to get to better be able to supervise this apprentice or this younger person.
That's what I was going to say, is that you haven't made it clear enough to them in a certain way. So you're making a mistake now by not allowing them to realize what they've done wrong.
And the anxiousness creates like fright as well, because they're not going to want to come up to you when they've made a mistake and ask how to fix it, because they know that the response is going to be they're going to get their bloody ass ripped, right? So I suppose it's really leaning into, if you're going to be taking on young apprentices, okay, what skills do I need to be able to make sure this person turns into a good tradesman and is yelling at them and is doing all of that effective? Now, of course, you're going to get certain people that just are not going to get it.
You will get a few airheads. You can't get away from that.
And then there's obviously another conversation whether this type of work is for them, or maybe they're better suited for somebody like another tradesman or another company or something. So there are those conversations. But what we're sort of getting at is punishment maybe should result in a very last resort.
Yeah, it's really about going through every avenue you can to get that point clear. So whether you have 5, 6, 7 different conversations in 6, 7 different ways, whether you have different tradesmen you can potentially put them with that they might click better with and understand better. Just the way I understand things doesn't mean the young guy's going to understand it. And the way I teach him is going to be very different to the way someone else teaches him. So you've got to really just feel into that, and the best way you can, try and get it through to them. And if it gets to a point where you've tried every single thing you can think of, you've talked to them every single way you can think of, you put them in every tradesman you can think of, and nothing's getting through to them, and then that's when you start looking at, okay, is this for you?
Yeah. And maybe, yeah, like you said, it's just maybe not for them, or maybe they need to move on to another company.
Now, this isn't just for tradesmen though, is it? When it comes to alcohol in the workplace.
No, you're right.
Because for you were in real estate. And I know for you, there was alcohol very prevalent in real estate as well. And it's a funny thing, because you see these people that sell houses as smart people, right? As very intelligent people, very on the go, always wired, always doing everything you need them to do to sell your house or to buy a house through them. Now, I don't know how much you knew about alcohol in real estate before you started with them, but for me, I didn't think much of it. Like there'd be awards nights and they'd have drinks there, but you thought most of them were pretty on the go, and alcohol wasn't really a big thing. Now, like I said, you obviously joined the real estate for a few years. We'd like to obviously have a conversation about how alcohol was so big in your time there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it was a big shock. Not too much of a stretch, though, if we think about the corporate world in general. It's very busy, it's highly strung, it's people wanting things done 2 weeks ago. So it does create a lot of hypervigilance. There's a lot of stress. And particularly when we're dealing with properties and investments and our homes, people are emotionally attached, right? As you can imagine, when you're trying to sell your home and move into your next home, or you're laying out a large amount of money for an investment, there's a part of you that wants to know every little detail of what's going on, when it's happening. You want to make sure that your money's being well spent, your money's being looked after. So it's a big thing. And for a lot of people, it's an emotional based experience. So for a real estate agent or a property manager, their sole responsibility is to make sure that the client is happy and the job's being done satisfactory. And that in itself is extremely high pressured because there's not a lot of room for human error in that. One little thing can have you blasted all over the internet for being incompetent or not looking after the this or that, not turning up on time. Like none of that is allowed. So there's not a lot of space for error. And like we spoke about previously, when someone's feeling that type of pressure, they need an outlet. So when I joined into this world of real estate, I soon became very aware about the pressure. I felt it myself. I had certain tasks that had to be completed, chasing up clients, dealing with angry clients. Like I was just doing a lot of that work. And I could also see being around other agents as well, the demand of the clients and the demand of the potential buyers and things like that. So I could understand why a lot of them were drinkers. Now, particularly if you are a real estate agent who is commission based, that doesn't leave a lot of room for boundaries. And what I've watched is a real estate agent will take calls well and truly out of deemed office hours, or in my eyes, acceptable hours, because they want the sale. And the sale means food on the table for their families. And it's kind of an industry that doesn't exactly sleep. So I know from experience, an agent I worked with particularly, she would put out an email or a blast or release a new property online, and she would be getting phone calls and texts all throughout the night. And then she'd come early in the morning, and then those people would be like, how come you didn't get back to me? I really want to see that property. And I could just see that pressure. And it was right there, smack bang, when she opened her eyes and looked at her phone, there was all the things that she had to do. Now, sidebar, this is an option. You know, you do get a choice in what you decide to work in. But for the purpose of this, it was just really painting a picture of how demanding this industry is. And so, yeah, I mean, I caught myself being wrapped up in that culture. Now, the few workplaces that I had worked in all had an alcohol fridge or had beers or wine in the fridge. And quite often, particularly again on a Friday afternoon, or if we had events on where we would invite other business owners or investors or open things up so that essentially the businesses could collaborate and do something together, we always had those events on. I can remember at least 6-7 events a year that we either hosted or went to. And then on top of that, we had awards nights as well. And as you can imagine, they were all at the Crown Casino. So big, massive events, all, you know, alcohol included in the package. And they were all big, boozy nights. So being a stay-at-home mom who worked on a marketing agency company to then having to go into, okay, let's look at trying this avenue that I've always been interested in, it was a wake-up call. But it was definitely an experience that I hadn't become aware of. But I could also understand it. I was feeling the pressure and I wasn't even at the time selling or leasing property. So there was a part of me that was like, okay, I can understand how a person could go to that. It's easy, it's accessible, it's legal. You're allowed to have it in the office space. We have our events based around it. So it makes sense that a lot of real estate agents would use that as an alternative.
So when you come from obviously that avenue of actually being in the middle of it all, it does make a lot of sense why there's so much stress involved, and why they would turn to alcohol to try and, you know, relieve that stress and forget about their days and try and push past all the crap they've just gone through for the week. But I also know for you, like you said, you were a stay-at-home mum at the time before you went into real estate, and then next minute there was a lot of weekends or even weeknights where you wouldn't come home after work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd go out to the local pub with the guys, and you would be out till, you know, 8-9 o'clock at night.
Yep.
So I'd come home from work, and then next minute you're not home yet.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like you mentioned, connection is a big thing. So I was at the time learning the industry. And I didn't know much about it. I had a background in digital marketing and advertising, so I knew that back to front. But when I come into real estate, it was just always something I wanted to learn. And I walked in and I got the job and I thought, great, now I'll just learn on my feet. So I was very new to databasing. I was very new to certain aspects like core logic. So there was a lot of things that I had to learn. And for me, that was very stressful. Like you're walking into any new job, it's very, very stressful. And then on top of that, we're dealing with highly strung real estate agents who are trying to lease and sell, and they got buyers and they got multiple offers to write up, and you're trying to figure out how to support them the best that you can. And yeah, for me, like I did create beautiful relationships with the people that I worked with, but I did realize a lot of it was based off the false sense of security around alcohol. And when the real stuff started to happen, particularly in my life, and for most real estate agents might even relate to this as well, sometimes if you just do not have those boundaries, it can bleed into other areas of your life. So I've personally witnessed marriage breakdowns that happen with real estate agents. I've watched how family time becomes less important because they're taking phone calls or they're dealing with clients because they didn't get signatures on time or they didn't go and pick up the keys, and they're always missing those little moments. And I'm like, the payoff's good, the payoff's massive in terms of when you sell a property, you can put food on the table. But what I've learned over the years is just money isn't everything. And I realized that me being caught in this industry, that was starting to bleed out into our family. It was so important to me to make something of myself, and I looked up to these people as role models, and then I realized like how just messy their personal life was, and just the fact that they were completely missing it or they were prioritizing the wrong things. And I watched a lot of them become depressed because of the things that were going on at home. And yeah, I mean, naturally, when you're in that environment, that's what you're subjected to. And if you don't have the skills to be able to separate it, like I didn't at the time, I very much became sucked into that culture. And like you mentioned, I would finish work, it would be a very stressful day. I'd go out, and the two people that I was working for at the time, they wanted to treat me or thank me for the week. So I'd spend a lot of time with them, and they were beautiful human beings and still are. So I really actually enjoyed spending time with them. But it was just winding down after such a stressful week. And I could see the catalyst that had happened from all of those little things. And I just realized that maybe this isn't for me.
I also remember one of the people you work for, obviously alcohol was pretty big in their lives in terms of they put that over everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now I remember you having to pick them up and drop them off and go to their car and take them home and
Mm-hmm.
all this kind of stuff because they lost their license due to drink driving.
Mm-hmm.
You now become the Uber driver.
Mm-hmm.
You now became the emotional support. You now became the friend in a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
Like you now became their own personal PA to help them with everyday life.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't deal with what's going on at home and you're using alcohol as a suppressant, it just bleeds out everywhere. It bleeds out not just with our families, but it bleeds out into work. And then the next thing you know, everything's on top of you and you just need that support. So the person I am, I could see what was happening. And so I instinctively offered that support. I didn't know what it looked like at the time, but yes, it did consist of picking them up and dropping them off because due to their own consequences, they had unfortunately lost their license due to drink driving. But all I saw was a person who just didn't have boundaries, who was in immense amount of pain, who was using alcohol to suppress and really just wasn't happy with who they were as a person. And that was another big wake-up call for me. It was really getting to the end of my time at that place. And I did also have another opportunity lined up at the time as well, which was a complete work from home base, which I thought was really good because I wouldn't be in that environment, but I'd still be working in real estate and still getting to learn those things. So it was naturally coming to the end of its course. And I know for me, my personal stuff had started to bleed into the workplace as well, because that's what the culture was. Like that's what we were around. That was what environment was created. So for me, I was watching everyone else's personal lives bleed out. And then when mine did, it suddenly was such a big problem. So for me, it was like, okay, I've really got to start dealing with my own stuff here. And this environment isn't the best environment for me to do that in.
Yeah, and not long after that, like you said, you found a new position. You're able to be home more, able to be with us more. And then from there, you moved on to another position, which allowed you to look at your own personal things and, start creating this life that we have now. So I guess for you, the same sort of question you asked me in terms of apprentices going into that workforce. For any young male, female that wants to go into real estate, either as a PA or as an agent, what would be your advice when it comes to alcohol and the stress and everything else that comes when working in real estate? What advice would you give in terms of working through all that and not being caught up in the badness of it?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just creating the awareness about the culture. So sometimes just knowing what you're walking into. One of the questions I like to ask, particularly in an interview when I'm being interviewed, is what is the culture like? Most companies will give you a really good indication of what it will be like. They'll be like, oh, we do pizza things or we do beers on Friday night. So you sort of get a bit of an idea anyway of what it looks like. So I would say from the get-go, ask the question. Second of all is do some work on yourself, some personal work. And when I say that, it's asking yourself certain questions so that when you are confronted with something like that, that you already have thought about this scenario. You've already got some skills or you've got some awareness around like your options in this situation. So for example, for me, if I'm stepping into an environment like this, and I know this because I'm going to be stepping into an environment like this very soon, I straight off the bat say like, look, I don't drink. I'm also a bit of a freak. I don't drink coffee either. And I lean in with humor, right? So, if anyone asks me to make coffee, sorry, can't make you coffee because I make shit coffee. But, so it's always leaning in with humor and it's just being really truthful about who you are and the standard as such and what you accept for one, yourself, but also in the environment. Second of all is just because other people do it doesn't mean that you need to do it. So you can put a real distinction in between those two things. But that doesn't mean that you can't build a connection with that person. For me, it took an immense amount of skills to become a people person. I'm talking, I had to watch videos, I got onto YouTube, I listened to a lot of TED Talks, I saw a lot of people who were really good at talking to other people and what kind of conversations they were having. And I just chose to learn that skill because I didn't have it. I was really awkward around people. I spent a long time being a stay-at-home mum. So I was really just around little kids for a long time. So I actually had to learn to develop that skill. Yes, it took a bit of time, it took a bit of practice, but the more I got into these environments and these workspaces, the more I was able to learn those skills. Also, it's just being okay with whatever happens. So if another person's choosing to do that or they're choosing to have drinks on Friday, it doesn't mean that, like you said, you can't stay back and join them by having a non-alcoholic or a Coke. Or for me, I used to make other plans. So a good way for me to leave that environment, particularly after a big week, was to be like, oh guys, like I've got this thing on, would love to stay, I'll stay and have a quick drink, but I've got to drive, I've got to go up to here and such. Or leaning in with health. So health is such a big thing at the moment. And I think it's great because if you've got the gym or you've got other commitments, like it's great. It's like, okay, well now I've got this on and I'm really focusing in on this, or I'm trying to shed a few kilos or gain some strength or whatever it may be. So it's that really sitting with yourself in that reflection, having conversation with your soul of going, okay, work is important and it's important the connections that we build at work because we spend a lot of time with these people, right? And I'm a big believer in we should be able to make a workplace or environment beautiful and comforting, and amongst the fact that we do have to actually do work, we should at least try and make it a little bit pleasant and joyful to be around one another. So I'm a big believer in that. And I know when I go into workplaces, I lead with that.
Yep. No, that's excellent. Well, I hope everyone got some good insight out of our journeys through our lives in terms of alcohol in the workplace. Feel free to reach out and tell us your journeys. Tell us what you've had to witness or be a part of. And if you either no longer want to be a part of it or we're caught up in it, you'd love to hear it as well.
Yeah, and if you are a person that's listening and you don't see a problem with any of that stuff, this is okay. Like, that's really okay. When we're not trying to make you feel any guilt or any shame or anything around your industry or what you choose to work in or the fact that you choose to drink. This podcast isn't for you, but it's for those people that are really struggling or do have fears about what could potentially happen in the workplace, because it is an influential environment to be in. And we do owe it to ourselves, but also to the other people around us to take good care of them, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, and like we said, this is just our journey. This is what we dealt with through our time in our workplaces. So if you get something out of it, beautiful. If you don't, that's fine as well. We're glad you listened. We're glad you hung around to get to the end part.
For sure, for sure.
All right, guys, until next time.